The Watcher of Dry Hollow wasn't the kind of place you stumbled upon. Tucked into a corner of Oregon's forgotten backwoods, it was marked only by a rusted signpost and the hollow echo of memories too painful to keep, yet too stubborn to die. To outsiders, it was a ghost town with living people, quiet, cautious, and unwelcoming to strangers. To those who stayed, it was a town held together not by faith or law, but by a mutual agreement. Don't dig. Don't ask. And whatever you do, don't go near the woods after dark. At the edge of town, where the trees crept too close to the last house and shadows fell long even at noon, there lived a man named Caleb Varn. No one knew where he came from. Some said he was a soldier who'd seen too much. Others swore he'd been here since before Dry Hollow had a name. Children whispered he could see ghosts. Or worse, that he spoke to the things that lived in the woods. The only thing everyone agreed on, Caleb didn't age like other men. His body got older, sure. The gray in his beard thickened, the wrinkles deepened. But his eyes? They never lost that hard glint of knowing, of seeing too much. They called him the Watcher. He didn't mind the name. He didn't correct them. Watching was all he did now. Watching and remembering. On the night Luke Barton disappeared, the sky was the color of bruises and the wind carried the scent of rain and something older, like earth turned over in a graveyard. His mother, Mara Barton, came pounding on Caleb's door just after dusk, breathless and shaking. He went. "Into the woods," she said, tears painting tracks down her cheeks. "I told him not to, God, I told him, but he said he heard something calling." Caleb stared at her for a long moment. Not at her face, but at the space just behind her shoulder, as if something stood there, invisible to her. Then he stepped back and opened the door. The boy had gone missing before the sun set. That meant it wasn't a normal disappearance. No child in Dry Hollow ever got lost after dark unless something pulled them. And Caleb knew what that something was. They walked in silence for a while. Mara clutching a flashlight, her hands trembling. Caleb with only a lantern that flickered, but never died. They passed the edge of the cornfields, now wild and dry from years of neglect. The trees leaned like watchers, listening. "You really think he's alive?" Mara whispered. Caleb didn't answer right away. "I think he's not alone." That's when the forest started to change. In Dry Hollow, the woods weren't just woods. They were thresholds, places where the world got thin, where thoughts bled into air and fear had a voice. Caleb had seen it as a young man, seen how the trees bent in impossible angles, how shadows moved against the light. The first time it happened, he'd been a soldier and he'd thought he was going mad. But madness had order. This was worse. As they moved deeper, the lantern began to flicker, not from wind, but something pulling at the light. The temperature dropped. Mara's breath became fog. She paused suddenly. "Did you hear that?" Caleb didn't answer. He had heard it, and the faintest voice, a child's voice, but not Luke's. "Don't listen," he said, "the woods lie." But Mara was already walking ahead. Then all at once they found it, a small bundle of cloth snagged on a tree root, Luke's jacket, still warm, and next to it, a trail of something darker than blood. Not wet, but black like ink, crawling toward the deeper forest. Caleb knelt, touched the cloth. It shimmered under his fingers, not visibly but spiritually, like it held a piece of the boy's fear. "They've taken him," he muttered. "Who?" Mara sobbed. "Who took my son?" He looked up, his face hardening like rock. "Not who," he said. "What?" Back in town, people locked their doors and turned their radios up loud, pretending not to see the lantern light in the woods. But one man stood watching from his porch. Jonas Ray, the bartender at the Hollow Tap Room. He whispered to himself, "He's gone back in, after all these years." His wife called from inside, but he didn't answer. He could see them, the faint shapes moving between the trees. Tall, thin, wrong. Something old had woken, and the Watcher had returned to the forest. And the part 2 into the forgotten woods. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. At first, Mara thought it was just the thickening trees swallowing sound, but it was more than that. The silence had weight, pressure, like a hand pressing gently on the back of your neck. Even the insects had stopped chirping. Caleb moved like a man walking through memory, slow, purposeful, eyes sweeping the dark as if reading invisible text written in the branches. Mara followed, stepping over, twisted roots and ducking under moss-draped limbs. She didn't speak, not anymore. Something about Caleb's presence commanded silence, or maybe it was the woods themselves demanding it. They weren't alone. That was clear now. 3 more had joined them by nightfall. Jonas Ray, the bartender who knew more than he let on. Annie Mayfield, the town's young librarian with eyes too tired for her age. And Reverend Colton, who hadn't set foot in the forest since the fire of '92. None of them said why they came. They simply appeared at the edge of the trail, lanterns in hand, faces pale and serious. Caleb gave each a glance and a nod, as if he'd expected them. Perhaps he had. The trees grew stranger past a point, not just tall, but wrong. Bark-like, blackened bone, limbs that twisted in spirals, leaves that didn't rustle but shivered. Then they came to the clearing. It was perfectly circular. No undergrowth, just earth, smooth, cracked, dry, like something ancient had burned here long ago and never fully left. In the center was a stone, jagged, unnatural, standing as tall as a man. Jonas stopped cold. "I remember this." "So do I," Colton said quietly. Mara turned to Caleb. "What is this place?" His voice came slow, careful. "A scar." That's when the forest spoke. Not in words, but in memory. Mara dropped to her knees, clutching, her head as images surged through her mind. Her son crying in the crib, her husband dying in the hospital, her own face twisted in rage. Jonas saw flames, a burning barn, a scream he'd never told anyone about. Annie wept silently, staring into something no one else could see. Only Caleb remained still, though his eyes shimmered with something dangerous. Something remembered. "They want us to feel," he said. "Because feeling feeds them." Mara gasped. "Who are they?" Caleb looked to the trees. Not demons, not spirits, shadows. "Shadows?" Annie echoed. He nodded. "The parts of ourselves we bury. They live here, feed here, grow strong when we deny them." Colton crossed himself. "This is madness." "No," Caleb replied. "This is truth." Then a whisper came, not in the air, but inside their skulls. It was a child's voice. "Help me!" Mara shot to her feet. "Luke!" She ran. No one could stop her. They chased her through the trees, the forest twisting and shifting behind her, paths changing, roots clawing at her boots. Until finally, she stopped. In front of her stood a small, dilapidated cabin, windows broken. Roof caved, but the door was open. Inside, the air was heavy, not with dust but with memory. Old toys scattered across the floor, drawings on the wall, a single bed with claw marks on the frame. Mara stepped in slowly. Then from the corner, something moved. It looked like a child, unhunched, shaking. "Luke?" she whispered. But when it turned, it wasn't Luke. It was a thing wearing his shape, pale, hollow-eyed, and smiling. The others arrived just in time. Caleb shouted something ancient, a language no one understood, and the figure hissed, vanishing, into smoke. Mara collapsed. Jonas pulled her away, trembling. What the hell was that? Caleb didn't answer. He walked to the center of the cabin where a strange symbol had been burned into the floorboards. A spiral inside a circle inside a handprint. He knelt, touched it, and whispered, "They marked him." Annie stepped forward. "Can we still save him?" Caleb looked up, eyes dark. "Yes," he said. But the deeper we go, the more it will cost. Outside, the wind began to howl, not like air through leaves, but like laughter. Dark things were moving now, unseen, but near, and somewhere far off a child screamed. Watcher had returned to the forest. Part 3. What Shadows Remember. The forest no longer felt like a place, it felt like a mind, and that mind was dreaming. As they left the cabin, the trees seemed taller, the sky farther away. Their lanterns dimmed, not from lack of oil, but from some unseen pressure gnawing at the light. Every step forward pulled at the soul like walking through a childhood nightmare, vaguely familiar, uncomfortably personal. The deeper they went, the more the woods remembered them. Jonas was the first to falter. He stumbled near a blackened stump and froze, staring ahead at nothing. "Jonas?" Annie called. He didn't respond. Then slowly, he whispered, "That's where it happened." "What?" she asked. He pointed with a trembling hand. "That's where I saw her burn." They turned, but there was no fire, no figure, just shadow. Annie stepped closer. "Jonas, there's nothing there." "Yes, there is," Caleb cut in, his voice sharp. "To him." "What does that mean?" Mara asked. Caleb knelt, brushing the dirt near Jonas's feet. A charred doll's head emerged. "Each of us," he said, "left a part of ourselves in these woods. The shadows remember." The group moved on in silence, shaken. They came to a ridge overlooking a ravine. On the far side, a weathered wooden bridge rotting with age suspended by frayed ropes. Across it lay the old hollow church long abandoned. Its crooked steeple clawed at the sky like a warning finger. Reverend Colton paled. "We're not going in there." "You will," Caleb said. "You have to." Colton gritted his teeth. "You don't understand. That's where we buried the ones we couldn't explain. The ones who changed." Caleb turned to face him fully. "That's exactly why we need to go back." Crossing the bridge felt like entering another time. The planks groaned beneath them, brittle and cold. Inside the church, the air was thick with mildew and grief. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting distorted saints on cracked pews. At the altar stood something, waiting. Not a person, not quite. It wore Colton's face, same eyes, same voice. But its mouth moved wrong, too smooth, too slow, like it had learned speech from watching pain. "You left us," it whispered. Colton stumbled back, clutching a rusted cross. The thing stepped down from the altar. "You let us die." "I prayed," Colton cried. "I tried." "You buried what you couldn't cleanse." The air turned to ice. The cross in Colton's hand shattered. Then Caleb stepped between them. He didn't speak. He simply raised his hand and drew a circle in the air. The creature hissed and shattered, not into pieces, but into memory. Screams. Fire. A boy in a white robe convulsing. A locked church door. Then silence. Colton fell to his knees. The church faded around them. They were back in the woods. Annie collapsed beside a tree, gasping. "I don't understand," she said. "Are these hallucinations? Ghosts?" "No," Caleb replied. "They're echoes of guilt of what we bury." "So Luke," Mara started. "He's not dead," Caleb cut in. "But the woods are feeding on his fear, warping it, turning it inward." Jonas wiped sweat from his face. "How do we reach him?" "We don't," Caleb said. "He has to reach us." Everyone stared. Caleb looked to the sky, now darkening, unnaturally fast. "We have to make him remember who he is, not what he fears." That night, they made camp beneath a twisted willow. Annie took first watch, staring into the dark with a knife in hand. Jonas checked his shotgun, useless but comforting. Colton sat whispering prayers under his breath. Mara slept fitfully, clutching Luke's jacket. Only Caleb stayed awake with his eyes closed, listening not with ears, but with something deeper. Then, a sound, a laugh, high-pitched, distant. Luke's laugh. Caleb's eyes snapped open. He stood. "Follow me," he said. Quickly. They moved through the trees like ghosts themselves, stepping silently, breath low. Then they saw it. A clearing, and, in the center, Luke, or something like him. He stood still, pale, facing a mirror of water. Surrounding him were 5 shadow figures, tall, headless, pulsing with emotion. Fear, rage, shame, grief, guilt, each a piece of him. "Luke," Mara cried. The boy turned, his face flickered, not just between ages but between versions of himself. Happy, angry, frightened, broken. "I don't know which one is me," he said. The shadows moved closer. "Then we'll remind you," Caleb said, stepping forward. He turned to the group. "You all know the cost. Are you ready?" One by one, they nodded. Then they stepped into the circle. Each person took a shadow. Jonas faced rage. Annie met shame. Colton embraced guilt. Mara walked straight into grief, and Caleb, he faced fear. It looked like himself. Younger, bloodied, eyes wide with terror. They stared at each other, and Caleb whispered, "I'm not afraid of you anymore." Then, silence. The shadows melted, and Luke fell to his knees, whole. He looked up at Mara, eyes full of tears. "Mom?" She ran to him, held him. The forest around them sighed, a long, low breath like a beast falling asleep, and the first light of dawn pierced the branches. Part 4. Beneath the Old Roots. The moment Luke rejoined the group, the forest began to shift. The shadows no longer recoiled. They watched, as if waiting. Caleb knew what it meant. The ritual had begun. They set off again, but not toward home. Instead, they walked deeper, not deeper in distance, but in time. The trees grew older, gnarled and cracked with runes too ancient to name. Moss covered bones. Vines whispered secrets. Jonas muttered, "How far does this go?" Caleb answered, "Farther than it should. Beneath the old roots lies the first memory. That's where the true shadow waits." Mara squeezed Luke's hand tighter. "What happens when we reach it?" Caleb didn't answer, because the truth was, no one ever had. By dusk, they arrived at the clearing, the place from Caleb's dreams. A wide stone circle lay sunken into the earth, lined with bone-white carvings. 6 standing stones surrounded it like guardians, each etched with a different symbol: eye, flame, thorn, mask, spiral, and mirror. "This is the Grove of Binding," Caleb said. "Our ancestors came here when the world bled too much fear into the soil." He handed out candles, salt, a black ribbon, a copper dagger. "Tonight we don't just confront the shadow," he continued, "we invite it." Colton stepped back. "You're insane." "No," Caleb said. "I'm already claimed." They formed the circle. The wind died. The woods fell. Silent, one by one, the candles lit, not from flame but from breath. Luke flinched. "Something's under us." He was right. The ground trembled, not from force but from awareness. Something beneath was waking. Then a voice, not spoken but felt, curled into their spines. "You opened the gate." The shadows stretched, inward, and from the earth itself, a figure rose. Not flesh, not spirit, but memory given hunger. It had no face, just folds of shadow. No limbs, just tendrils of fear. Its form echoed the worst part of each of them. Colton's betrayal, Mara's grief, Jonas's rage, Annie's silence, Caleb's guilt, Luke's doubt. "You are not real," Annie said. The thing answered, "And yet I live in every decision you regret." Then it attacked, not with claws, but with visions. Each of them was pulled into a mirror of their worst moment. Annie was back in her childhood home watching her sister drown while she stood frozen, too scared to move. The silence louder than any scream. Jonas relived the moment he turned the gun on a friend during a panic, never knowing if he'd pulled the trigger by accident or instinct. Colton faced the children he locked away, for their safety, now, surrounding him with bleeding eyes and empty prayers. Mara saw Luke in a hospital bed, alone, the machines flatlining as she looked away for just one moment. And Caleb, he stood before a burning village, his hands covered in runes, his master, whispering, "This is the cost of your ambition." But Luke? He stood outside it all. He watched his found family fall into despair, and he refused. "No," he whispered. The creature turned its empty eyes to him. Luke stepped forward. "I'm done being afraid of what I've done. I'm here now." He reached toward the center of the ritual and placed his palm on the mirror stone, and with a pulse of truth, the illusions cracked. One by one, the others broke free. Their regrets didn't vanish, but they no longer ruled them. They stood, united. The creature shrieked, a sound like glass and sorrow, and lashed out. But Caleb stepped forward, raised the copper blade, and cut the black ribbon circling the stone. The shadow recoiled, tether broken. "You wanted to be remembered," Caleb said. "We remember, and we choose light." The creature writhed, then slowly dissolved, not into smoke, but into roots, curling into the earth like a seed accepting its fate. The stones dimmed, the candles flickered out, and dawn came unnaturally early. They didn't speak for a long while. Then Jonas said, "So, it's over?" Caleb smiled. "This part." Annie looked to the woods. "But there's more." Luke stepped forward. "I know the way out." Mara pulled him close. And as they walked toward the morning, the grove of binding sank behind them, hidden once more beneath the old roots, waiting for the next remembering. Part 5. The Man Who Walked with Shadows. The forest was silent again. No cries, no whispers, just the soft rustling of leaves under Luke's feet as he was carried in his mother's trembling arms, back toward the faint outline of Dry Hollow. Behind them, the circle of stones where Caleb had stood was empty. No sign of the old man, no trace of the ritual, just shadows, now calm, now still, as though they had fed and now slept. Luke blinked slowly, his small hand gripping his mother's coat. He was thin, pale, but alive. His eyes flicked toward the trees once as if searching. Then he whispered, "Where's the man with the silver eyes?" His mother held him tighter. She didn't answer. 1 week later, the town of Dry Hollow moved, on like it always did. It had seen fires, storms, and scandals. People forgot quickly. They wanted to. It was easier. The search for Luke had officially concluded successfully. The sheriff gave a speech. Flyers were taken down. News vans rolled out. But no one spoke about Caleb. No one ever had. At least not kindly. For the few who had gone into the woods with him, those days remained burned into memory. Some swore never to return to that edge of the forest. One left town entirely. The rest just avoided eye contact when the subject came up. As for Luke, he was different now. Quiet, watchful. He didn't laugh like he used to. He wouldn't talk about what had happened, but sometimes at night he'd whisper to his window, and sometimes he'd listen, like someone was whispering back. The Whispering Path. There's a trail behind Dry Hollow that no one marks on maps. It splits from the main forest path, curving, like a question mark through the dense thickets. At its end, no cabin, no circle of stones, just trees and a silence that isn't quite empty. And sometimes, only sometimes, when the fog is heavy and the moon is full, someone sees him. Not clearly. Never. Clearly. But they speak of a tall figure wearing a long coat, a wide-brimmed hat. He walks without sound. The shadows don't fall around him, they follow him like old dogs. He doesn't speak, doesn't look back. They call him the Watcher. Some say he's a ghost, others say he's the forest's guardian now. But a few, mostly older folks who remember, Caleb, who remember the boy who vanished, know the truth. He is not dead. Not quite. He walks with the shadows now, because someone must. A memory in the fog years past. Luke grew older, but the town never changed much. On his 15th birthday, he left a note on his pillow and vanished before dawn. His mother found it hours later. "Don't worry. I need to talk to him. I think he's waiting for me." She ran to the woods, heart pounding, breath caught in her throat, and deep within the trees she saw it, just for a second. A boy, older than she remembered, walking beside a man in a coat. Their silhouettes melted into the fog. Behind them, the shadows followed, calm and watchful. She cried out, but no answer came. Legacy: no one else went missing for years after that. Dry Hollow stayed quiet. Some said it was just luck. Others felt something unspoken had been restored. But when storms swept in or strange dreams came to children, people lit candles on their windowsills, just in case. Not to call something out, but to thank something watching, something old, something burdened, something still walking even when no one sees.